Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. I had a little bit of trouble getting into my switchboard here this morning. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and we're on for about 27 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And I'm glad to be here, glad to be able to do these shows. And I'm going to put the chat room open here in just a second. And, I don't know what happened. Hopefully I'm streaming, because sometimes when BTR doesn't start out properly, the show doesn't stream properly, so hopefully I'm streaming through and you can hear me. But anyway, I want to continue looking at a topic that we've been talking about for about 3 weeks now, and that's to do with anger management. And I think it was a huge issue for me, and I really wanted to cover this topic because I had experienced a lot of anger issues related to the abuse that I suffered as a child, and I think so many people do. I know lots of survivors myself. Who, as a child, I knew lots of survivors, lots of children who were being abused, actually. And we hung around all the way through our lives until our young adulthood. And, the issues that arose because of that, the anger and the violence and whatnot that sort of stemmed from the abuse that we were all suffering as children, was very evident. And I knew I had my own anger issues, and I thought, it'd be really good to take a look at this. And I found a great website, and it's angerresources.com, www.angerresources.com, ANGERESOURCES. And I just stumbled upon it, but it's really good information from Dave Decker and Michael Obsatz, and I hope you will go check it out and take a look at it. It's everything to do from like road rage to the shame rage connection, for survivors of abuse, right? And so it covers really the whole wide topic of anger and anger issues and anger management, and how we can change our behavior, how people who have problems in this area can learn to handle anger effectively, and because anger is a natural response, it's a natural occurrence, and we are going to get angry, but we need to learn how to deal with it. So that's why I like this article. I like this website. I hope you will go check it out. Yesterday we left off talking about the domestic abuse has to stop, and it can. And that's, I'll give you hopefully that's the correct title. Yeah, The Domestic Abuse Has to Stop, and It Can by Dave Decker. And we left off pretty much down towards the end of the article, and it was listing off the whole sort of the behaviors and whatnot, and the controlling behaviors that people put on one another, right? Whether it's a partner in a domestic violence or abuse situation, parents put on their children, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, threats, and non-physical threats and violent threats. Violence toward property or pets is where we left off. And then he talks about sexual abuse and physical abuse. So you have to listen at your own discretion. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a private citizen doing my own shows. I'm a survivor of child abuse and a secondhand victim of domestic violence. And I think, my shows are very sensitive. You have to listen at your own discretion to all of my shows, because I talk about abuse. And abuse is a very sensitive topic. And if you're just not comfortable, not sure you're going to be comfortable listening to the material, you just please turn the show off. You won't be hurting my feelings at all. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my show, because I'm really fighting to protect children's lives, save children's lives, and really promote child rights, right? And children have the right to protection at all times. And so if you're a young person under the age of 18, I ask that you have permission to listen to my shows at any time. Get somebody who's older, an adult who cares. Hopefully you have someone in your life that cares enough to take a moment to see what you're doing online, and you can kind of let them listen to the show with you, and that way they can sort of help you decide whether you should be listening to it or not, because I don't really know how young the people are who are listening to my shows, right? So that's the thing. It's very important, because there's a chat room situation here, and in the chat rooms you have to be very much aware that, you need to, as a young person, keep yourself safe at all times, and not, because there's child sexual predators out there everywhere, and they are always looking to get a hold of children and you need to know how to keep yourself safe, especially when you're in a chat room situation or online. There's good information out there on how to protect yourself. And just type into your browser online safety, internet safety for children, internet safety for families, and keep yourself safe, right? Do what you can to keep yourself safe. So we're going to get right into this article here. And I want to finish off, we were looking at the next section, which was the next portion of this, which is the fifth category, is violence toward property or pets. He says here, I'm just reading right from the page, which is damaging possessions or hurting pets to intimidate or coerce her into doing what you want her to do. Now, he's talking to men here, but the thing is we all know that women are abusers too, and they can be abusive just like men. Anyone can be an abuser. Children can be abusers. Anyone can. Abuse is a choice, and it's what people choose to do to another person. So it's anyone can be abusive. Anyone can be an abuser, right? And so, but he's talking specifically to men right here. But I know that this stuff all, definitely relates to women as well. So, because women can be abusive. So, but this is the whole issue of violence toward property or pets, which is damaging possessions, hurting pets to intimidate or coerce your partner or your children or someone into doing what you want them to do. And these actions are also generally perceived as violent threats to those who see the behavior or the damage left behind. And examples of this types of abuse include hitting walls, slamming doors, smashing your fist on countertops, throwing or breaking household items, and hitting or kicking a family pet. And this is kind of what a lot of people experience. A lot of people in my lifetime, I've seen this quite a bit, especially growing up in the home that I grew up in. People smashing things, smashing countertops, smashing tables, smashing household items, breaking things and throwing things was just a normal occurrence in my home. And it wasn't the children doing it, it was my parents. And they were very violent and directing the violence towards each other as well as the children. So we all experienced this in my home. As far as hitting and kicking the family pets, my parents actually treated the pets better than they did their children. So they weren't abusing the pets, and that's my dad would have been more likely to kick a pet than my mom. My mom actually had a heart towards animals, where she didn't mind lashing out and hurting children, but I would never see her, and did not ever see her kick or hit a pet, right? We had a dog at one point, and we had a couple of cats around. She was more interested in beating on her husband and on us, right? But my dad was more likely to be mean to the pets, because he was very mean. He was very mean to his children. He was abusive to his children, so he didn't mind hitting or kicking his children around. So he was kind of, we had to worry about the pets too with him, because I didn't trust him around the pets for sure. And but this is what people go through, living with this destruction and damage to property, and it's very, very much hard on kids when people are slamming doors and breaking things. And what it does do, if you spend enough time in it, which I did my whole life, you tend to take on these behaviors. So I used to slam doors, and I used to smash things and break things, and become very violent in the home. And not generally other people's homes. I knew how to behave myself at other people's homes, but it was our home. That was the behavior at our home, and so that's what we did, right? A sixth category is sexual abuse, which is making sexually inappropriate verbal statements and forcing physical affection, touch, or sex on a partner. This is what he lists here. He says examples include viewing and treating her and other women like sex objects, insulting her body or lovemaking abilities, grabbing or pinching her in sexual areas, pressuring her into doing sexual activities she doesn't feel comfortable with, and forcing sex when she says no or when she's sleeping. Now, this is a serious problem. It really is marital rape is what it is. And sexual abuse of children, we know, happens, and it's absolutely horrible. The whole idea that somebody wants to force a person to do something that they don't want to do, it's just a form of control. And that's what, a lot of people don't realize, you know what I mean? It's just another way of controlling somebody and doing and trying to get them to do what you want them to do, whether it's for self gratification or whatever, right? It's extremely wrong. And I know women can be sexual abusers too. And this is the truth, this is the facts, man. I mean, it's just the way it is. Anyone can be an abuser, so that's the whole issue. Men and women are both sexual abusers, whether they abuse each other or another adult or children, right? So it's not just men who abuse sexually. But the whole issue is that it's either way, it doesn't matter. It's absolutely horrific that people do these type of things to their partners and to their children. It's absolutely wrong, and it's against the law. And so, a lot of people don't realize it's against the law, and they just think that their partner or their parents have the right to do these things to them when actually they don't. When someone says no and they don't want the actual sexual contact, then that means no. And if the person forces them, that's rape, or that's a sexual assault. That is, and a lot of people don't view it that way. But you know what? It's true. And it's horrible to watch that in your own family. I actually witnessed that myself because my dad was always forcing himself on my mom. And, one time he didn't realize I was in the room sleeping, and he actually forced himself on my mom, and he raped her, right? And I witnessed that at the age of 6 years old. So that was horrible. And I've had, therapists and stuff say, well, how do you know it was rape? Well, it's because when you know that your mom's fighting him off and punching him, and then he's punching her and calling her names and choking her, that's rape. Right. She did not want him to have anything to do with her, and he was forcing himself on her, and that's rape. That's what you see in the movies. When you watch a movie about someone raping somebody, especially a man raping a woman, and they're slapping the person, they're threatening them, and they're like grabbing them by the neck and holding their arms down and stuff. That's forcible rape, and that's what my dad did to my mom. And the thing is he did that to her all the time. That wasn't just a one time. I mean, he had been doing that to her for years. And so, I know what the difference between rape, and just, a couple having sex, right? So I don't know why that therapist would have questioned what I had to say there. But the whole issue is my mom was in a hugely abusive marriage, and, my dad was a very sick man. And so he just felt like he had the right to treat her like that. He felt that because she was his wife, he had the right to force her to have sex, and she had to put up with that for many years. She didn't have to. She could have left the relationship, and we used to tell her to leave. And as the children, even my older brothers and sisters, used to tell her to get out, and get away from my dad, but she never would, and that's just the sad part, right? Then we started to not feel sorry for her when I got older, because I realized that she could leave and that she was putting up with the abuse and abusing all of us and me especially, for nothing. You know what I mean? She was staying in this relationship when she didn't need to be staying in it, putting up with my dad and and then abusing us because of it, right? All for nothing. And that's the whole issue, that after a while you start to, as a child growing up in that, you start to almost not feel sorry for the person. You're just like, well, hey, if you want to stay in that and you want to allow yourself to be treated in that, that's your own fault. So there's a lot of psychological issues surrounding that whole thing, and it's absolutely horrible what happens to people. And if you're in one of those situations and you're being abused in any way, I don't care whether it's, verbal, emotional, psychological, physically, sexually abused, I would hope that you would get some help and not suffer with that. That's absolutely unacceptable. Abuse, there's no excuse for abuse, and it's horrible what abuse does to people and to children, right? And they said that the final category is physical abuse. It says, which is using any physical actions or force to control a partner or situation, and this includes grabbing, pinching, bumping into her as you go by, pushing, restraining, slapping, or punching. And if these sorts of behaviors are occurring in your relationship and family, he says, get some help. Not just for yourself and your partner, but also for the children. He says, control and abuse are learned, at least in part, from the families where we were raised. And if these attitudes and behaviors continue, your children will carry on the legacy of control and abuse in their own lives and relationships, and you will end up miserable and alone. And it's just so true, right? We know about the cycle of abuse, and it's absolutely horrible. And, physical abuse, that's just very sad, but people do physically abuse each other, and a lot of people think it's a joke, and if they haven't lived through it and experienced it, they just don't understand what it's all about, And it's using physical force or physical punishment or physical whatever to get somebody to do something, or to be in retribution of something that they've done, right? So whether it's a punishing thing, like because they didn't like something that you did, or don't want you to do something or whatever, or if it's just because they want to control you, right, or the situation, they will use physical force and physical abuse, and that includes any number of things. It's absolutely horrible what people do to each other, and it's absolutely unacceptable. You know what I mean? So yeah, I like what Dave Decker says here. You know, it's like you have to get help and get help for yourself, and especially get help for your if you have children in the home. It's Dave Decker says he says here that Dave Decker's practice offers a comprehensive domestic abuse program. So this is from a while back, so I don't know if if this is still the case, and he still actually has a practice where he's currently serving, individuals for domestic abuse and whatnot. But this is what he says here. There are other programs in the area, in all areas of the country, and it says, make a commitment. It's time to stop the cycle of violence and abuse in your life and in the lives of your children. And he says here, we as men, because he's talking to men here, we as men can change the attitudes and behaviors that create this frightening atmosphere at home. And the future truly can be different. There is another way. And so I just think that this is such good information, and he's really working to get people to sort of see what they're doing and stop their behaviors, that are hurting themselves and hurting their families. It's the whole thing. It hurts everyone in the family. It's not just like the abuser ends up getting hurt too, because sadly enough they ruin the relationships with everybody that they come in contact with that they abuse. So it's like my dad, he can never excuse me. He can never ever have a good relationship with his family because he blew that so many years ago. My mom's passed on, but the thing is neither one of them had a good relationship with any of their children, and there were a few of us children that actually tolerated them as adults, and the rest of the kids took off. And the rest of my siblings, some of them wouldn't have much to do with my parents, and even still don't with my dad. And they ruined that whole that family situation because they didn't create a loving home. They didn't create a safe place for their children, for themselves. They didn't create this bond that was needed to keep this family together. And so, a lot of my siblings just took off, and one ended up dead, and then there was a few of us that actually tolerated my parents all the way through. We were the last children, right? My sister and myself. And we sort of, were able to look past the abuse in order to try to help them. And a lot of people would be like, well, why would you do that? And it's like, well, because when you love somebody, that's the sad part. After you're a grown person, and my parents, like after the age of 18 especially, I could have left the house, I could have been gone, but I cared very much about my mom, and I knew my dad was still going to try to force her to have sex, and I knew that he was going to force himself on her. So I stayed in the home and pretty much didn't sleep for about 10 years just to keep an ear out and try to stop my dad from abusing my mom, right? And so that's the whole issue. People do what they do, and I did that because I wanted to. I wasn't forced into staying, and that's why I don't really regret those 10 years. But what I do regret is the fact that my mom set me up, for a huge fall, right? Because she later dropped the bomb on me that she didn't care about us and didn't want us, and was really trying to hurt me later on in life, right about the age of 30. So this is the thing, right? People who are psychologically abusive, just because they stop, if they don't change their behavior, they'll just use you for whatever they can get, and that's basically what my mom did. Very, very sad. And and I was so looking for this bond with her, that I didn't have as a child, right? So that's why I stayed in the home. And it was absolutely horrible what they did to each other. And there's people in my family that think it's perfectly okay. I even told them, I said, you know that Dad raped Mom. You know that this is so serious to me, because I witnessed it. And I'm like, you know that he raped her. And I have family members that sit there and go, so? I mean, this is how dysfunctional my family is. This is how sick they are. This is why I avoid them, actually. And I am avoiding them because I told them that I was sexually abused by one of my siblings, and they don't care. They're just like, so? See? They have no concept that is so wrong, and that children should never, ever be abused in any way. They just think it's okay. It's like, oh, yeah, no problem. They know that I was beaten with that rolling pin. My sister keeps that rolling pin and drags it out every now and then and looks at it and says, oh, here's Mom's rolling pin. And I'm like, that's the stupid rolling pin that she almost killed me with. And I tell her, and she just sits there and, oh, but I love this rolling pin. I love Mom. And it's like, yeah, you love the fact that Mom bashed my head in with that thing. Could have killed me. So she doesn't care, right? She's very much a sick person herself, right? And it's anybody who can sit there and have empathy for somebody who who would try to kill you, there's something wrong with that person, right? And my dad, was very abusive and really could have killed my mom at any time, and he really threatened her life many times and threatened our lives as well. But my mom was also doing the same thing. They were very sick people, and they, a lot of my family just wants to pretend it didn't happen because it was so psychologically damaging to grow up in that home that basically they had to basically become dissociative in order just to survive. I really think that was the case. And for me, I just chose to stay in the reality, in the reality. You know what I mean? I did a lot of drugs as a young person, but the thing is I was always cognizant of what was going on, and I knew the truth, right? I knew what was happening, and I just got high so I could try to deal with it. But the thing is I didn't dissociate, and I think some of my family members did, right? And then for whatever reason, it just might have been too much, because it was too much. It was absolutely too much. And, that's the whole thing. It's very, very hard very psychologically damaging to children who experience that, right? So we have about 5 minutes left. I want to cover, there's another section here that you can take a look at. It's called Defining Domestic Abuse by Dave Decker, and it's from the same website, angerresources.com. And he says, volatile and punishing anger and controlling and abusive behavior are always destructive in a relationship and always contribute to a loss of trust, respect, safety, and intimacy. They are never helpful in problem solving or conflict resolution. Both men and women can be abusive in relationships, he says. Abusive behavior, as it is defined below, occurs in many relationships at some point, and abuse by either partner is not okay. However, the gender of the person who is abusive can make a significant difference on the ongoing impact of abusive situations, especially when there is a consistent, ongoing, and systematic pattern of abuse in the relationship. And it says, although abusive behavior can happen between any two people, in the large majority of cases it is men in heterosexual relationships who are more able and more likely to direct methodical and systematic threats and physical force in order to maintain control in a relationship. Women can also be abusive and violent in relationships. And this is not all right either. It says, however, there is generally a significant difference in the impact of male and female violence. Even when men do experience physical abuse from their partners, they are not as likely to feel the intense fear, humiliation, and intimidation, nor are they as likely to suffer the severity of physical injury that women do. So he says here, men are on the whole more likely to be able to dominate the relationship through the use of threats and physical force than women. And so he says, moreover, once a man has actually been physically or sexually abusive in a relationship, other types of abuse take an additional impact. At that time, emotional and verbal abuse then become much more frightening and controlling by the female partner, or for the female partner. And a single act of using physical force clearly demonstrates that a man, if he is unable to control his partner through verbal and emotional abuse and threats, has the potential to up the ante again to physical abuse in order to maintain his dominance in the relationship. So both the man and his partner know that he has already used violence in the past, and once physical abuse has occurred, it becomes that much easier to violate this physical boundary the next time he becomes explosive and threatening. And I know all about that, and that's what that does to people. The next time they go to do that, because you've already experienced either the physical or the verbal violence, you automatically are that much weaker to defend yourself because you freeze, because you already know what it's like to experience that person's wrath. And I know, like, experiencing that as a child, and I also experienced that as my friends' domestic violence issues, right? So he says here, the following outlines 8 types of abuse and gives examples of each. So read through them to see which ones you have seen yourself do with your partner or others in your life. So he talks about what we were just sort of talking about, but goes way more into what he means by his different statements as far as male entitlement goes, and the different types of abuse, right? Emotional abuse, controlling, verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, threats, and whatnot. He really goes right into examples and things like this, right? And this is stuff that, I completely have understand and have been there, excuse me. So we'll take a look at this tomorrow. But, things like making statements about pushing, grabbing, or hitting her, like, I'd like to smash your face right now, or I really feel like letting you have it, or knock it off or I'll kick your butt, or things like this. Keep it up and I'll smack you upside your head. Well, that's how I grew up. And that's the whole issue. But it wasn't just threats, because it was always followed through with. Well, it wasn't always followed through with. There was a lot of threats that weren't followed through with. But there was a lot of threats that were followed through with. And so when the threats would come, you just didn't know whether it was really going to be followed through with or not. And, sometimes I could tell, sometimes I couldn't. But I know my parents were very much like that as well. And my mom would be like, if you keep that up, I'll kill you. That's how serious she was. She would tell my dad stuff like, I'll kill you in your sleep, And my dad would be like, well, I'll kill the whole family while they're sleeping, right? And they were always trying to, one-up each other, right? So it's like, well, I'll kill the whole family. And, they were just very sick, very, very sick individuals. And they had the fear going on in the home, let me tell you. And so it wasn't just my mom being, fearful of my dad or the children. Like, we were all in this big mess of psychotic kind of fear and hostility and anger, right? And it was absolutely ridiculous. And then we'd go to people's homes, and my mom would say, well, we've been invited over for dinner to so-and-so's house. And so everybody's going to put a smile on their face, and we're all going to behave. Because if we don't, if I have to come home and we've had any problems over there, then there's going to be hell to pay. So we would go, down the road to go to somebody's house for dinner, and we would all act like a normal family. We'd have a great time. And because actually we were having a good time for at least 2 hours or 3 hours out of that day. If we went to somebody's house, I could guarantee that I wasn't going to be beaten on over there, because my mom would be pretty much under control at somebody else's house. She used to beat me up in front of their house and stuff like that. But that happened a few times. But she generally tried to control herself. They would fight and argue a little bit at other people's homes, and she would still make threats and stuff, but she wouldn't just lash out and kick my butt at somebody else's house. But the thing is we would all have to straighten up for a few hours and then go to somebody's house and pretend. And that was the weird part, was being forced to switch that on and off. Like, okay, at our home we're not normal and we're not behaving ourselves. But then when we go to somebody else's house, we have to behave a certain way. And it becomes very psychotic and very much a psychosis, right? It's just craziness is what it is, and a horrible way to grow up. If you're experiencing this right now, I'm telling you what, get yourself some help. Reach out. If you have to phone a crisis line, do something. You know what I mean? My God, no one deserves to be abused. I'm telling you, I'm going to say that until the day I die. I'm so sick and tired of people minimizing abuse and acting like it's no big deal, and they should just take whatever abusive behavior they want to put on you. And if you're the abuser, then you need to stop your abusive ways and get some help with that, and make sure that you are not abusing the people in your life. And if you're the person who's being abused, make sure you get some help, because there is absolutely no excuse for abuse, and you do not deserve to be abused. So I'm just going to keep on talking here, and I don't care, because too many people like to minimize it and want to keep it pushed under the carpet, and it's absolutely ridiculous that people would think it's okay to hurt somebody, and especially a child. It makes me sick to my stomach. So if you're experiencing this right now, make sure that you get some help, right? If you have to, like I said, call a crisis line, get a hold of somebody, get some help, right? Because you don't deserve to be treated like that. So have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you again. I'll be back on tomorrow morning with One Child Abuse Survivor to another. Hopefully I'll be on time for my show, and hopefully I'll be able to get into the switchboard. So take care, and reach out, keep reaching out, get some help. It's so important, because you know why? You matter to me, and you do matter, and you do count. And you do deserve to have a good life and to have a decent life, and be treated decently. And it's just a matter quite often of just reaching out, because people don't know to reach into us, right, as survivors and people who have been there. Sometimes people don't know that we're experiencing this stuff or have experienced it. So you sometimes, and almost always, have to be the one to reach out, right? So that's why I keep saying that. So have a great day, everybody. Take care of yourself. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.